Antony Armstrong-Jones lived like a royal wrecking ball, and the full scale of his betrayals only exploded into public view decades after his fairy tale wedding to Princess Margaret. In 2004, a DNA test finally confirmed that he had secretly fathered a daughter during his honeymoon with the Queen's sister. And the mother was the wife of his best friend. This is the real story of the man who nearly shattered the royal family from the inside. A glamorous royal wedding, a stylish commoner turned earl, and a princess desperate to be loved. On paper it looked like a modern royal love story. Behind palace walls, though, Antony Armstrong-Jones was hiding affairs with women, rumors about men, and a secret child whose very existence exposed how rotten this marriage was from day one. If you want more brutally honest stories the palace would rather forget, hit subscribe to History Exposed TV right now. Turn on notifications and stay to the end. Because the last twist in this story proves just how close one man came to tearing the royal family apart. From privileged outsider to royal insider. Antony Armstrong-Jones was not born a prince, but he was never truly ordinary. His father was a successful barrister, and his mother later married into the aristocratic Parsons family, making him the step-relative of the 6th Earl of Ross. In 1930s Britain, that connection put him just close enough to high society to move in elite circles, but still far enough outside to feel like an ambitious outsider looking in. As a child he battled polio and was left with a permanent limp, yet still pushed himself through demanding boarding schools, including Eton. There he discovered photography and rowing, interests that would eventually give him both a career and a persona, the intense, stylish artist who refused to act like a deferential background figure. Antony went on to Cambridge to study architecture, but when he failed his second-year exams, his path took a sharp turn. Instead of becoming a respectable professional like his father hoped, he decided to risk everything and pursue photography as a career. An idea his cold, demanding parents treated with thinly veiled contempt. But his social connections gave him access others only dreamed of. In the 1950s, he built a name as a fashion and portrait photographer, shooting theater stars and models in a relaxed, modern style that felt daring in buttoned-up post-war Britain. His studio became known not just for the images he produced, but for the wild, boozy parties that followed the sessions, with beautiful women and London creatives crammed into his Pimlico space until late at night. Rumors, secrets, and a double life. As his star rose, so did the whispers. Antony surrounded himself with bohemian friends, including gay men, and rumors about his affairs with both women and men never quite stopped following him. Later biographies and friends would describe him as effectively bisexual, saying that his appetite for new partners, of any gender, seemed almost compulsive. Publicly, the relationship he allowed most attention on was his on-again, off-again situation with showgirl and socialite types, used in part to distract from his more controversial liaisons. What almost no one in the press understood, however, was that the most explosive relationship of his life had already begun, with the Queen's younger sister. Winning the Queen's trust, through his elite contacts and growing reputation, Antony was eventually hired to photograph the royal family, including Queen Elizabeth I herself. His style was looser and more modern than traditional royal portraiture, but the Queen liked the warmth and informality he captured, even if some courtiers thought he was too casual for the job. Being invited behind those palace doors made him part of the royal inner circle at a time when the monarchy was trying to look more modern, more human, and less remote. To the outside world, this handsome, artistic photographer seemed like a refreshing addition to royal life, exactly the kind of figure who might help drag the institution into the 1960s. Princess Margaret, from client to forbidden lover. What started as a professional connection with Princess Margaret soon turned into a secret friendship. Then something much more dangerous. The princess, already burned by her doomed relationship with divorced equerry Peter Townsend, found in Antony a man who felt reckless, exciting, and defiantly non-royal. Margaret disguised herself and slipped out to visit his studio, where he would seek her opinion on his photographs and entertain her with his bohemian friends. The royal family, desperate not to repeat the humiliating media circus of her previous relationship, wanted to handle this one differently. If Margaret was going to marry this commoner, he had to clean up his image. Starting with his work, behind the scenes, Antony quietly began backing away from his commercial commitments, prepared to give up the career that had finally brought him success. A royal wedding, and a buried betrayal. In 1960, Buckingham Palace announced the engagement of Princess Margaret and Antony Armstrong-Jones, and the reaction was electric. Millions watched as they married in Westminster Abbey in the first ever British royal wedding broadcast live on television, turning their ceremony into a global media event. The honeymoon took them to the Caribbean for 6 weeks, while London society buzzed with fascination and envy. What no one knew, not the public, and apparently not even Margaret, was that one of Antony's past affairs was about to catch up with him in the most brutal way possible. During that same period, a baby girl was born in the home of his close friend Jeremy Fry and Jeremy's wife Camilla. life as an earl, and a powder keg. After the wedding, Antony was granted the title Earl of Snowdon and took his place alongside the royal family. But the adjustment was rough. Traditionalists in the press disapproved of a princess marrying a commoner, and even inside the palace some staff looked down on him, treating him as less than a full royal. He also clashed with Prince Philip, who saw him as overly sensitive and artistic, in sharp contrast to Philip's own tough, outdoorsman image. Antony, who had given up much of his freedom and work for this marriage, now found himself under constant scrutiny, stripped of his outlet, and increasingly resentful of the rigid royal world he'd stepped into. Glamour, parties, and a crumbling marriage. On the surface, the couple embraced 1960s, swinging London. Their son David was born in 1961, followed by daughter Sarah in 1964, and together they mixed with celebrities, artists, and musicians like the Beatles, while moving through London's most fashionable circles. To the cameras, they looked modern, chic, and enviable. Behind the scenes, emotional distance and constant pressure were eroding whatever stability they had. Antony began disappearing on trips and was frequently linked. Quietly at first. To women such as Pamela Collin, a married Vogue editor, Margaret, feeling humiliated and trapped, started to respond in kind, taking up with friends and acquaintances in an escalating cycle of revenge and escape. Affairs that turned deadly. Margaret's affairs, like Antony's, ranged from brief flings to longer entanglements. She was linked socially and romantically to figures from actors to aristocrats, including Robin Douglas Home, a nephew of a former prime minister. That particular affair ended, but its aftermath was grim. Around a year and a half later, Douglas Home died by suicide in his 30s. A tragedy that darkened the already toxic reputation of Margaret's love life. Meanwhile, the royal family hoped that by allowing the couple to quietly lead separate emotional lives, they could at least avoid the public disaster of divorce. Antony appeared to handle the arrangement with icy detachment, slipping between work and lovers, while Margaret spiraled into heavy drinking and increasingly rude, erratic public behavior that anti-monarchists used as ammunition against the crown. Mystique. Paradise with a ticking camera. Early in their marriage, a wealthy friend gifted the couple land on the Caribbean island of Mystique, which Margaret gradually turned into her personal refuge as the relationship imploded. While Antony mostly stayed away, Margaret used the island as an escape from royal duty and from her husband, surrounding herself with a volatile mix of privilege, alcohol, and younger companions. It was there that she grew close to Roddy Llewellyn, a laid-back 25-year-old aspiring gardener and son of a famous horseman, while she was in her early 40s. At first, it looked like just another fling, but this time the press got photographic proof. Images of Margaret and Roddy relaxing together in Mystique, obtained by reporters sent specifically to catch her off guard. Public disgrace and private revenge. When those Mystique photos were published, the royal family could no longer pretend Margaret and Antony's marriage was functioning. The scandal forced Buckingham Palace to publicly confirm a separation in the mid-1970s, acknowledging that the couple would live apart, even as they initially insisted there were no immediate plans for divorce. Antony, however, was done waiting patiently for palace protocol. Immersed in documentary work and spending more and more time with a production assistant, Lucy Lindsay-Hogg, he pushed for a legal break. When the institution dragged its feet, he effectively forced the issue by making the separation public himself, leaving Margaret and royal officials scrambling to catch up, divorce, and an instant replacement. In 1978, after nearly 2 decades of a volatile and increasingly miserable union, the marriage formally ended in divorce. The first high-profile royal divorce of the modern era. Almost immediately, Antony announced that he would marry Lucy Lindsay-Hogg, the woman who had begun as his colleague and quietly become his partner while he was still technically with Margaret. They married that same year, and for a while, the new relationship appeared more stable and less publicly poisonous than his first marriage. But Antony had not changed his core patterns. Even as he smiled for society photographers with Lucy, he was already deep into another secret affair that would run almost the entire length of that second marriage. The 20-year secret affair. Around the time his marriage to Lucy began, Antony started a relationship with journalist Anne Hills, a connection that would stretch on for about 2 decades. Hills wanted more than just stolen moments and clandestine meetups, but Antony repeatedly refused to leave his wife, keeping their affair hidden from Lucy and the wider world. By the mid-1990s, Hills was facing career setbacks and personal heartbreak, all while still emotionally entangled with a man who would not fully commit to her. In the late 1990s, she died by suicide, leaving a note and diaries that documented her long relationship with Antony. When authorities examined those records, the story leaked to the press, and Lucy discovered, through headlines, that her husband had been cheating on her for virtually their entire marriage. Another child, another scandal. Even that was not the end of the damage. Just a couple of years after the Hills revelations, Lucy learned that Anthony had fathered a son with magazine editor Melanie Cable Alexander, a woman almost 3 decades younger than he was. Their child, Jasper, was born in 1998, further confirming that Anthony had never truly left his reckless, boundaryless approach to sex and relationships behind. Lucy eventually divorced him, but in a twist that shows how complicated their bond remained, the two stayed on amicable terms. In his later years, she was still involved in his life and helped care for him despite the betrayal she had endured, a loyalty many observers found both astonishing and unsettling. The truth about his desires. Throughout his public life, speculation about Anthony's sexuality never entirely went away. Later biographies and accounts from friends described him as effectively bisexual, mentioning affairs or alleged affairs with men as well as women in creative and aristocratic circles. One associate summarized his reputation with a cruel but telling line: "If it moved, he was interested." Whether or not every rumor was true, what is clear is that Anthony lived according to his own rules, indulging desires across class, gender, and marital boundaries with staggering disregard for the emotional wreckage left behind. Royal protocol, social expectations, and basic loyalty all took a back seat to whatever, or whoever, he wanted in the moment. The honeymoon child no one talked about. For decades, the public believed that Anthony and Margaret's marriage had slowly fallen apart under the weight of mutual infidelity and clashing personalities. But in 2004, a revelation showed just how early the rot had set in. That year, a woman named Polly, raised as the daughter of Jeremy and Camilla Fry, heirs to the Fry's chocolate family, took a DNA test to answer lingering questions about her parentage. The results confirmed that her biological father was not Jeremy Fry, but Antony Armstrong-Jones, Lord Snowdon. Even more shocking, Polly had been born in late May 1960, just a few weeks into Anthony's marriage to Princess Margaret, essentially during his honeymoon period with the Queen's sister. Sleeping with his best friend's wife, the scandal did not stop at the timing. Jeremy Fry had been one of Anthony's closest friends, involved in the same glamorous social set, and he was almost chosen as best man at the royal wedding before quietly stepping aside. The DNA revelation showed that while preparing to stand beside his friend at the altar, Anthony had already crossed the ultimate line, sleeping with Jeremy's wife, Camilla, and fathering her child. For years, both men denied rumors that a DNA test had taken place, dismissing the story as nonsense, but eventually Anthony acknowledged that Polly was indeed his daughter. For the royal family, the confirmation meant that Margaret's marriage had been doomed from before it truly began. The man she had fought to marry had betrayed her and his closest friend at the very moment the world was celebrating them. The man who nearly broke the royals. By the time Anthony died in his 80s, the public record on his life painted a jarring contrast. On one hand, he was a talented photographer and designer who helped modernize royal imagery and champion disability rights through design and charity work. On the other, he was a serial cheater whose trail of affairs involved best friends, colleagues, married lovers, and at least 2 secret children, leaving behind suicides, divorces, and generational scars. His marriage to Princess Margaret helped drag the royal family into televised, celebrity-style fame. But it also exposed just how fragile the institution could be when private chaos spilled into public view. In a very real sense, Antony Armstrong-Jones came dangerously close to blowing apart the royal family's image from the inside. Not through politics or scandalous speeches, but through the relentless destructiveness of his own desires. If this story shook your image of royal fairy tale marriages, there are countless more secrets where this came from. Subscribe to History Exposed TV, hit the bell so you never miss an episode, and share this video with someone who still thinks royal weddings end in happily ever after. And in the comments, say whether you think Antony Armstrong-Jones was a tragic product of his world, or the man who almost shattered the royal family by choice.